Good morning and welcome. I'm Jane Clark, president of our Michigan West Coast Chamber of Commerce. So excited to welcome everyone today, both our attendees here in person and our attendees that are here with us digitally. Thanks for making it a great day with the Chamber. We want to give you a chance to get to know each other, so we're going to do a short tabletop networking exercise. Of course, it's a Chamber. We're all about making contacts. So we're going to do name, share your name, your company, and your very first job. Name, company, first job. And for our attendees watching from home, just go ahead and use the chat feature. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. Well, I hope you've had a good opportunity to get to know the folks that are with you at your table today. And I want to remind you, as you leave today, do not feel rushed to leave. We have this space available. Stay as long as you like to continue networking, and certainly this venue gives you great opportunity with the coffee shop and the other amenities to stay as long as you like and get to know other Chamber members. And speaking of getting to know other Chamber members, we're going to pause here and meet today's sponsor, which is Consumers Credit Union. And I'm joined on stage by Michelle Cheney, who's the Vice President of Lakeshore Markets for Consumers Credit Union. We're just going to have a quick conversation to help you get to know the credit union a little bit more. So Michelle, give us that 30-second elevator speech about the credit union. What should we know?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you this morning. So just a little bit about Consumers Credit Union. We were formed in 1951, and we are based right here in West Michigan. Our corporate headquarters is in Kalamazoo, and it's been in Kalamazoo since our inception. And we moved here to this awesome community of Holland back in 2005. We were in the North Meyer on West Shore Drive. And then we finally built our first location, our first brick and mortar office in Holland in 2008. And back then, we actually had, I believe, 11 offices throughout West Michigan. And today, fast forward, we're at like 24 office locations in West Michigan. We just opened our Grand Haven location in August of last year. And this year, March 1st, we opened our Muskegon location, so we are growing. We've been fortunate to have over 18% growth year over year for at least the last 10 years, and it's all been organic growth. So we're really proud of the fact that we haven't grown through mergers and acquisitions. And our next market is Lansing. We're actually under construction with 2 locations in Lansing.
That's great. And I know Consumers has been very engaged in the West Coast Chamber. Certainly, Michelle, you personally have been very, very engaged, especially in our support around small businesses. Why don't you talk a little bit about your commitment to small businesses?
Sure thing. So obviously, we have a ton of great financial institutions here in West Michigan and specifically here in Holland as well. So, we do a lot of the same similar services and products that you would find at any one of those financial institutions, but we do have a little bit of differences. First and foremost, we really work hard to get to know our business owners on a first name basis. My cell phone probably has more business owners' phone numbers in it than others. And so they call, text. We really want to be an extension of your team. We work really, really hard to make sure that we're helping you achieve your success that your business needs. And we try to move as many obstacles out of your way as possible so you can focus on your business and not have to worry about your bank account. So we really enjoy that. We also love learning about the businesses that are here in town. We have such an amazing foundation of business organizations that are here. And so we like to learn and like to partner alongside you.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then finally, as we wrap up, let's talk about your commitment to our community. The Consumers has just been an amazing partner to so many organizations in the area.
Thank you. Yeah, we love this community, and there's so many nonprofit organizations. And this year we were really honored to be able to come alongside the Lakeshore Nonprofit Alliance and sponsor the community assessment that really looks and evaluates the health of our community and provides some guidance on what we need to do next steps to continue to keep the vibrancy going. And we're excited this year to partner with Tulip Time. We're volunteering for over 70 hours for the week of Tulip Time. So that'll be a lot of fun. Thank you. And all of our staff are encouraged to volunteer with an organization that really matches their passions. And so we constantly are encouraging people that work with us each and every day to get involved. Go out there. If you find a nonprofit organization that you're passionate about and you want to volunteer, let us know and we'll make it happen.
Well, Michelle, thank you. Thank you again for your personal commitment to the West Coast Chamber and that of Consumers Credit Union. It was great learning more.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. So now it's time for our main program, and we are in for a real treat today. We're going to learn from an expert in helping people and organizations thrive. We've invited Dr. Marcus Fila. Marcus is a professor at Hope College and a well-known speaker, researcher, and management consultant, really helping us address work stress and its effects on all of us. As I mentioned, he's an associate professor at Hope College. He has his PhD in leadership and organizational analysis, his MS in industrial and organizational psychology, and his MBA from the Kingston Business School in London. So somebody very well qualified to speak on this topic today, how to keep your people, tackling turnover. And boy, we know as we're out speaking in the community, this is top of mind for all of our members. So welcome, Dr. Marcus Fila.
Pleasure. Does it sound still okay? I was told not to get in front of this screen because of the online audience, so if I start wandering over there, if someone could just wave at me, that would be really good. Boy, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to see each and every one of you. The hardest thing today is to actually cover this topic the way it should be covered in the time that we have. So it's going to be about looking into some key areas and just a few pointers to really help you. And this is something that I'm very open to talking about with you further. We can get in contact at any time that you'd like. This is a subject close to my heart. I was actually paid to make employee turnover happen. I used to be a headhunter, an executive recruiter for Big Four accountancy partners. I was based in London. We did work there. We did work in the US. We did work all over the world. I was in that was an IT recruitment as well. And the people I spoke with were usually very senior. It was nothing great that I did that early in my career. I was just blessed to be in that kind of role. And they weren't looking for work. They weren't looking to change when I was first getting in touch with them. This wasn't going to sort of a job board, finding a resume and talking to someone. This was very different, taking someone who'd been embedded in there in a partnership for years and gradually talking them through the process of moving to our client. So we'd never move people because they wanted more money, although obviously a lot of them did, because that's a weak reason for someone to change job, because if you're being paid a fee to move them and then they get another offer somewhere else, off they go, it makes us look bad. And what was interesting to me was when you're dealing with sort of these accountancy practices, the big four like Deloitte, Ernst & Young, people like that, they all really do the same thing. They'll have different values on their website and they'll brand themselves differently, but they all really do the same thing. So I thought, we're not moving people for more money. They're really going to do the same work. If you're an audit partner in, say, oil and gas clients in Ernst & Young, then you go to Deloitte to do the same thing. So why would they move? Why would they move? And I got really interested in this because it was always around things like missed opportunities, not enough autonomy for the skills and the training and the qualification that they had, being overlooked, and various other things. And I sort of became more interested in clearing up the mess left behind by employee turnover than being paid to make it happen. So I had a bit of a radical career switch and got into academia, and I then was working under one of the world's top 5 employee turnover researchers, Dr. Roger Griffith, down at Ohio University. Go Bobcats, right? I mean, it's not OSU, it's OU, so the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right, surely? So that's why I'm here today. So just because we don't have a lot of time, obviously, I'm just going to get into a few what's and whys of turnover and then talk about this thing called a turnover audit. And then just a few points of how to reduce it and what to do from there. And I'll leave a little time at the end for questions. In fact, what I'll do is I'll get my phone out so I can just keep an eye on time. And then we can go from there. What's interesting about employee turnover to me is that it's very easy to think of an individual choosing to leave a company as just one person making a choice, but there's almost always a system reason for that person to leave. It's the system that they're working in, it's the system that they have at home, it's the industry that they're in, and the wider reasoning as to why they would leave. Because usually they've got somewhere else to go when they quit. I know we're seeing right now with what they call the Great Resignation, a lot of people are just quitting jobs left and right, and apparently they have nowhere to go to. Where they end up is going to be a question. The number of them that just come back in a year or so is going to be a question as well. But I think the first thing to do is to think of turnover as a system issue, okay? And when I talk about stress at work more widely, and of course it links to turnover hugely, it's always a teeter-totter, or as we Brits say, a seesaw, right? It's never just one thing or the other. And there's a huge gap between what's happening in the research that I'm involved in, and of course tons of other people are, and what you hear about and what you read about. You know, you go to the airport and you pick up Entrepreneur or Forbes or something, and occasionally they'll run an article on sort of burnout or employee turnover or something, and they almost always pitch it, even HBR, bless them, they almost always pitch it as you and how you're managing your tension at work and why you left your last job. And very rarely do they take the other side of the teeter-totter and say, well, what's the system reason behind why someone left? So that's the first thing I'd encourage to do, us all to do. So it's the act of someone leaving. It's not a thought, it's a thing that they actually get up and do. You know, I used to say when I was a headhunter, I've never gone into a Big Four practice, put somebody in a brown bag and drag them out of there. They've chosen to leave of their own accord. But we've got voluntary versus involuntary. So I should say at this point, some turnover is good, some turnover is necessary. Some people are in the wrong job, and then the question is more about what's the recruitment process that's happened for them to be there in the first place, or have they just been very good at lying to you on the way in? So some people you want to leave. Some people are going to retire. Some people are going to pass away. Some people are going to move away. Okay? So some of it's inevitable. But what we're looking at here is the worst kind, which is dysfunctional turnover, which is turnover that you don't want to happen because you want that person to be there, and where they choose to leave. That's by far the worst kind, the most expensive kind. Does anyone have an idea how much it costs an organization on average? Now, of course, there's going to be huge variation here based on the seniority of the person, the industry that you're in, etc. But does anyone have a ballpark idea of what it costs when somebody leaves? Yes, sir? 90,000. Okay. Anyone else? 15, 1-5. Okay. It's somewhere between, this is quite a wide ballpark, but even the lower end of this is huge, 60 and 200% of what that person is earning when they leave. They just walk out, that vacuum that has to be now filled. The people around them have to work harder, which might induce further turnover. Okay? The whole process of deciding who they're going to bring in, the whole process of doing that, onboarding that person, so from when that person just leaves to getting someone else who's there in that seat, being at least as productive, costs about that much. So you can imagine, I mean, you could go in, and I do this, and I don't mean to sound pitchy when I say this, but you know, when I go and talk to people that lead companies, and they say, well, if I work with you, what's my ROI? I'm like, turnover, reducing turnover, that one person gets saved, one person that you want to keep gets saved will far outweigh anything that I would ever charge you. Right, because of that expense. And you can go to a company where they have 8, 10, 12% employee turnover every year and work out that maybe 2/3 of that is dysfunctional turnover. And then you start to look at what that bottom line number is to their business and how that cascades through their company operationally and how that affects other things. And it becomes a little bit of a vacuum. I don't mean to sound so depressing, but I'm just trying to get you into it. Yeah? We'll talk about some happy things too. I think I've really covered most of this. So turnover also begets turnover. When people see people leaving, often they think, well, hang on a minute, what are they onto here? You know, a good friend, a good colleague leaves a company, there must be a reason. And people, as we know, always talk. Word spreads. And why does it happen? Well, the other systematic part of turnover is, when you look at individual reasons, there's usually push and pull going on at the same time. Okay, so people will often talk about the push that they have. You know, oh, I don't like my boss. Oh, we had a budget cut and it's hard to get things done, etc. Oh, I was overlooked for this promotion 3 times. And then there's often pull to where they're getting. Now, this is where I'm genuinely, of all the years I've spent in this field, confused about the number of people right now who are just quitting and not going anywhere. I just literally don't get what's happening there. But it's like, in every other sense, it's like there's usually somewhere they're going. Somewhere they're being pulled towards a more attractive offer, on some level. And it's very rarely, surprisingly, about money when it comes into it. It's also a hassle to leave, and it's risky. Because think of all the trust you build up with your colleagues and how long that reputation takes, and then you're going and starting all over again somewhere else, and yes, you have your reputation in the industry, right? But it's still about the personal contacts day to day, isn't it? It's always about the people around you, the people that you're working with, and they're human beings as well as you. And then just sort of transferability. You know, if people are transferable, they have options. And then, of course, there's always family reasons. My favorite one when I used to be in the recruitment game was when you'd have a company say, yes, we want that person, the person saying, yes, I want that job, and then you do the whole sort of conversation around compensation. Everyone says yes, and then they go home, and their spouse or partner says, actually, no. And, there's lots of reasons. People are sometimes just going to move away as well. Organizational reasons. We could probably fill a whole day on this one, right? Think about your organization. Think about somewhere that you've worked maybe previously. What are some reasons why people have left? And I talked about that at the beginning. Some huge ones that just don't get talked about enough, but get shown again and again and again in all of the research, is a lack of autonomy. I mean, it's not the only thing, but a lack of autonomy, a lack of control for the level that you are. And you see this a lot in particularly professional service industries, where they hire, bright, young, aggressive, energetic, well-qualified people, and then put them in very small boxes and baby them. And they don't take the reins off. And I'm not saying that you just let everyone do precisely what they want every day. But if, I give whole sort of training areas on this of just like, okay, if you were to go from where you are now and micromanage people more, how would you do that? What are the specific aspects of the job you would lean into and take away that autonomy? Now go back to this beginning point and go the other way. And go the other way, right? And that's such a driver of retention. And then there's just wider industry reasons. And let's all just be human. Some of this is outside of our control. Okay? How's the industry that we're in faring? Are people jumping ship to another industry? They're not just leaving the company, they're leaving the whole field of work and doing something different. What are these wider political, economic, social, technological, legal, environmental issues that are going on? Sometimes they drive turnover, and you can't help. You have to let people go at times because of these, and at other times people choose to just get out of the game they're in and go to something else. So we get to, and then we'll get on in a minute to kind of what to do about it, the blame game. Whose fault is it when someone leaves, right? And it could be, well, was it the employee? Was the employer? And by the way, let's be real, employees are never going to be honest about this either. I mean, whoever leaves a company, goes to have a coffee or, a beer or a glass of wine with a friend or a colleague and say, it was my fault I left the company. I really wasn't good enough at my job, and I saw it coming. I just quit before I jumped before I was pushed, right? How many times have we ever heard that? It's always about this blame game. But this internal wrangling, and this is a really important question for a moment here, right? When you have a case of dysfunctional voluntary turnover, and I don't mean like point out the target in the company when I'm saying this, but what's the reason? Who is most? Where does the attribution for that lie? Is it the immediate supervisor? Well, tons of research is saying that's the most important relationship of them all. Is it the colleagues? Is it the network of people around them? Is it the policies of the company? Is it the policies of the CEO, the president? Right? And there's going to be sort of a mixture of reasons usually. It's not always on one place, but it's worth knowing. And what happens, sadly, is it gets ignored because there's generally fairly fragmented reasoning as to why that person left. It's usually not just one thing. So we just say, well, it's too hard to tell. Never mind. Never mind. We'll just hope it doesn't happen again, right? So we normalize it and we just say, this is how life works. People leave. That's just the way it goes. And again, we don't often learn anything, and we deal with that expense, as I was saying earlier. We just deal with those problems. Okay? So we need to get out of this negative cycle that I talked about. And we shouldn't get complacent about it either. We shouldn't just say, well, that's just life. So let's talk about what we do about it. We need to break the cycle and switch to more of a retention-minded cycle. And again, what's sort of beautiful about this subject and the sort of wider stress, burnout, job design subject is that even if somebody was completely heartless, and I'm sure there's not many heartless people in this room, but even if someone was completely heartless and said, I just care about the bottom line, I really don't care about people, to actually pay attention to this is going to affect your bottom line so hugely that even if that was your only concern, there's so much in it for you here. So we'll just get into a couple of things here. The turnover audit. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these right now, purely because of the time that we have and we don't have. But there's two ways to look at turnover, or rather retention. It's how do we sort of keep the people that we have now so we don't have any more people leave, all right? And then how do we actually change the system that we're in so that as we bring in more people, because people are always coming, people are always going, fewer of them leave from there. So we've got two different things going on. Here are some things that sort of beginning really right the way through to how to retain people that start coming in the door from now. And again, we could have so much time on any of these. Some part of it is just assessment. This is something you can do, this is something I do, to actually understand what is going on in your company right now. It's almost like a psychological balance sheet of what's happening right now. What's the level of job satisfaction? Again, across the whole company, within teams, within departments, within divisions. How are they perceiving things like the balance between the effort that they're putting in and the reward that they're getting from you? Okay, here's a good one to assess. What other options do people perceive they have? One of the drivers of turnover, of course, is how many other options people think that they have, you know? A little cultural point coming from the UK. Actually, I'm not really from the UK. I'm from the Texas-Oklahoma border, and it just took me years to get the accent down. But it's something that's often, you know, we talk in one of the management classes I do at Hope about this cultural thing called a Johari window, and there's things that people come from outside your culture, they move in, and it's not that they know more about your culture than you do, but they'll see things differently. Like if you move to the UK, God forbid with the weather and the food, but you know, if you move to the UK, you would start telling me stuff about that I probably never picked up on. And something that's really interesting to me in America that almost never gets said is because the country is so big compared to the UK or a Germany or a Norway or somewhere like that, there's always this deep DNA-level psychological perception of choice. Even if you're quite rooted in the area that you're from. I could go somewhere else. I have other options. It's much more of an employee's market generally. I mean, particularly now. And obviously the ebbs and flows. When the economy is in the tank, 07, 09, for example, it was much less of an employee market than it is now. But generally speaking, it's always part of the recovery, and that American bounce-back ability always takes it back to being more of an employee-centered market. I was talking about this. I was doing a talk with an online talk with people in the UK last week. And I said, you know, in the UK, it never felt like that. It always felt like, this is the way work is, you deal with it, and if you don't like it, there's 200 people that will take your job like that. And it feels, generalizing far too broadly, it feels far less like that in America. Yeah, there's going to be niche industries where there's competition, and there's going to be zero-sum games going on, but generally speaking, people have this choice. So, I wonder if it's worth asking people, in a way that could be less overt, what choices do you perceive you have? You know, that could be slipped in there very easily amongst other questions about job satisfaction, liking for the area that they're in geographically, attachment to it. Worth knowing. Recruitment, this is the only one from this audit that I'm going to get into, is just really, recruitment is where it begins, obviously, and it's a house built on rock or on sand. And this is, I would say, one of the areas where there is so much that we can sort of use as a touch paper to light the fire of either retaining people or sowing future turnover based on this. And it's almost like, now this might sound obvious, but are we really clear what we're looking for? I always go to companies and I ask them this: where are your job descriptions coming from? Who's writing them? And sometimes people say, well, we write them ourselves. Okay, great. What are the expectations there? Where are those? Are those firm-specific expectations? How much are you plugged into what people are looking for in the industry more broadly? And I'll talk about this at the end just a touch more, is this concept, it's sort of fairly new in more of the research side of work, this concept of legitimacy at work. We always talk in business about knowing about what the industry around you is doing. So yes, it's about you and your values and all those things and the way we do things around here, but it's also a wider game than that. It's about the industry that you're in, and if you do things radically differently than the other firms that do what you do, that might be because you're a huge innovator, or it might be because you're aware, or perhaps not quite so aware in some cases, of just how things are normally done. And it comes across hugely with recruitment as well, job descriptions, where what's in them? And where are those expectations coming from? And how congruent are they with someone who's coming to work for you or interviewing to work for you, who's had 3 other jobs doing the same thing in 3 other places, what their normative expectations are? And if we're way out of sync, would you ever imagine a surgeon to change a bedpan, right? They can do it. It's not a hard thing to do. But to expect them to do it is a very different matter. And you can almost get very surgically into the job descriptions rather than, I think a lot of people will sort of try and go the other way. They'll try and be as general as they can with job descriptions. They'll be like, okay, let's just make this as broad as we can to attract the largest pool of people we can. And then there's always that last bullet point, isn't there? And other duties as assigned. Okay? But what we need to do, not in an inflexible way, but just get more into the specifics of what people are expecting to do. And this really gets onto what I've already talked about, knowing the landscape. What's happening around you? What is going on around you? What are other companies doing? How are they doing it compared to you? It's not that we want to copy them and always be a follower, but again, if we're really out of line with how things are normally done in an industry, we're going to not be connected to this wider picture, okay? You don't want to be an organization that runs parallel to what everyone else in your field is doing. It's a bit like here at Hope College. If I'm also a professor at Hope College here, and my job description here is radically different than it would be in this kind of college, it would be compared to a big school like the 2 big schools here. But if it's different compared to Calvin, where my wife works, or other colleges like that, you go, well, why is it different? Is there a purpose for it being different, or is it just badly designed? And how much are there intricacies in there that are driving why people are leaving, okay? So you want to be legitimate. You want to be seen as someone who is congruent with what's happening. Let me spell this last point out in a bit more detail because it's worth putting the time into this. This really is the newest area in the research, and this is something that I enjoy talking to organizations about. And again, we could go on this one for a whole day. The real reason I think turnover is happening at this point, coming at the end, well, hopefully the end of this pandemic, is a case of professional identity feeling violated. Now, that sounds very wishy-washy and ephemeral, doesn't it, right? But professional identity is hugely important to us, right? When we introduce ourselves to people, we say, hi, I am this. I am a consultant. I am a professor. I am a tax accountant, right? So just as we have identities in our lives like mother, father, brother, sister, son, daughter, supporter of a very poor soccer team in the UK, all that stuff, we have an identity in our work, and that's absolutely huge. And the key thing is here, kind of linking to my previous point, our professional identity in what we do is not germane only to us. It's normative. So somewhere between everyone is an individual and no 2 of us are the same. I got a bit close then, didn't I? And God made everyone as a human being, right? Somewhere in the middle here, there's clusters of identities, right? I'm a father. I'm sure there's other people in this room who are fathers. It doesn't make us the same guy, but there are things that we can share in that identity, okay? Imagine that in a professional sense, in a work sense, okay? That you have that there. And if we find that our job starts to violate these normative expectations of who we are and what we should be doing, I think that, well, it's showing that that's a huge driver. Now, why is this such a big thing now? Because the whole deep underlying reason for perception of violation has come through job design. It's actually the root of a lot of these things, the job descriptions, the recruitment, what's going on. The design of the job is way under talked about. It's always about my boss is bad, or I didn't get this pay rise or something. But the design of the job is huge, absolutely cataclysmic. And if we get that wrong, we face trouble. And of course, during COVID, the last 2 years, what's happened? people have been, in a lot of cases, forced to work from home. Managers, supervisors have been forced to do what a little bit more with their employees? Someone tell me. Someone said it. Trust, right. Managers, supervisors have been forced to trust people. Well, this is, go back even 5 years. You want to work from home? How do I know you're working? How do I know you're doing everything that's on your plate? COVID comes, we haven't got a choice. We've got to trust them. So any manager worth their salt is going to try and adapt the systems right and go, okay, how do I feel at peace when I go to bed at night that people are actually doing work the way that they should be? Okay? And we've gone through 2 years of this adaptation, and employees have gone, goodness me, I'm going to prove I can be trusted. I'm going to come up to the plate. Not in every case, obviously, but very much normatively. I'm going to show them that I can be trusted to work out of my spare bedroom at home or wherever it is. And they've gone out their way. And now we're hopefully getting to the end of this thing, right? People are doing precisely what a lot of us thought, and just en masse saying, right, back to the office, no nuance. It's like flipping the switch back again, right? Everyone come back in. We've got 4,000 people in the company, back in, 8 to 5, right? And I'm not saying we should keep it as it is, but there's been 2 years of lessons and 2 years of nuance and 2 years of figuring out how to work our identity through those issues there. And people are going, hang on a minute, are we just going to throw all of that away and go back to feeling like I'm being watched all the time over my shoulder? And that's not the only issue, but it's a huge one, okay? And I honestly believe, as a sort of time-specific reason for turnover, that that's happening. So my question is, as a business leader, as an HR leader, what are we doing right now to find that sweet spot between what we did before the pandemic, what we did during the pandemic, which was obviously in a lot of cases very different, and what we're aiming to do now? Are we just going to throw away those 2 years, or are we going to find this new middle ground, this nuanced way of doing it? So yeah, so my last point is your position or your role and your normative identity should all line up perfectly. This is what someone doing that job does. This is me. This is my identity. And this is what this role is. Those circles should be as close together as possible. There shouldn't be big gaps there as we come to this new era. Last point. I think right now it's about measured flexibility and radical candor. Because the door swings both ways on this from a turnover perspective, right? We can't just become, we can't just sort of sit there and say, well, employees can demand from us anything that they want, and we have no comeback because we don't want to lose them, because that's just going to end up making us have a very different kind of employment relationship with them. So for all of the flexibility that I'm talking about, the other side of that coin, because again, I see this very much as a teeter-totter, is radical candor. Hey, I'd like to continue working from home every day. And if you don't let me, I'm going to leave. Okay. Well, we used to recruit people within the 40-mile radius of this company. Guess the world's our oyster now, isn't it? How do you feel about that? Right? And that's where I'm sort of like thinking that this whole great resignation. Personally, I'm going to make a big prediction. I might be completely wrong. Within a year, it will be coming to its end and people bouncing back, because I think there's going to be a realization with a lot of people that wherever they're going to, they're going to find the same issues that they've jumped away from and left. The world of how work is designed is not going to change quickly enough to satiate the hunger of the people that are running all over the place right now. So we have to get this balance between radical candor and measured flexibility. What next? Happy to have a conversation with you anytime if you'd like to. I do talks with organizations, I do training, seminars, I do assessment to help organizations, and then what we do is we pick in and we find where the problems are. And by the way, I never look for problems. I'm never searching for them. I'm always sort of saying, if you are set in this area and this area, let's leave that alone. If there are some areas where we're seeing things happen, turnover issues in some parts of the company more than others, okay, let's dig in and find out exactly why that's going on, and then creating effective interventions to reduce that problem and sort of help your bottom line apart from anything else. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I hope that gives you something, and I'd love to hear your questions.
Thank you, Marcus. We've got time for some questions. I'll start with one.
Yeah, sure.
One of your earlier points was about recruitment and how that's fundamental to solving some of the turnover problems. What are some of the trends you're seeing as the successes people are having with recruitment?
Being very, good question. Giving realistic job previews. Being very clear about what expectations are for the role. Now, people know typically there's 3 or 4 main things that you're going to do in any role, okay? But where the problems lie is not usually in those areas. It's the sort of fluffier edges, right? What am I responsible for? What am I not responsible for, okay? I'm kind of feeling like I'm expected to do this stuff, but I don't know if I'm being judged on it, right? Those are where you get the fluffy boundaries. So people are sort of really, really clear about these are what your expectations are. And, yes, we need an all-hands-to-the-pump attitude. We need employees like that. But expecting employees to be all hands to the pump in that fight-or-flight way of being every day, every week, every month, every year is not realistic. So we go, this is what people can rest on, knowing that this is what they're supposed to do. That's been a huge one. Obviously, there's competition around benefits, but I often think that that's a little bit of a ruse for people are searching for that because they can't find an answer to, that first point. They don't feel it's clearly spelled out to them.
I always say it's all about expectations. Just ask my children. That's
Yeah.
one of my lines raising
very
them.
much
It's
so.
all about expectations. Questions from the audience? Yeah,
Yes.
Go ahead, Tom.
You gave an example of a response to an employee who says, I want to work from home. I'm a small service business, so we have people in the field. We really don't have a lot of people that can work from home.
Right.
But we've had the employee focus. We've provided additional income. We've raised salaries. We've raised PTO. But we're still getting some of our employees that are going, well, I want more flexibility, or I want to be able to leave early, or I want this, I want that. In a service business where you have people in the field, what does that conversation look like? Instead of the person that wants to work from home, well, that's fantastic. I guess the world's our oyster. You're saying, I've got the whole world, I can replace you with it. I don't have that luxury, nor do I want to have turnover. I value our people and want to make it work for all of us. So what does that conversation look like for a service?
Well, I think an important point is to always try and bring it back with that individual or those people as a two-sided conversation, which is, okay, here are the things that you want. What do you think I want out of this? Right? And just ask them that. And then their response to that is going to be a huge indicator of whether they have you and the system of your organization at heart, or whether they're really in it for themselves. And if they turn around and say, you know what, I understand where that question's coming from. Here's what I think you want, and here's what if they sell back to you, in other words, why it's worth you giving them that flexibility, and they show that they care about you and the other employees and just the overall system there, that's a vastly different set of, even if the expectations that they have are similar, that's coming from a different spirit, if you like, than someone that says, well, I just want these things or I'm going. Because once people start saying, I want these things or I'm going, how much can we then, I totally feel your pain. It's like, I don't have 10 people I can just replace them with. But it's almost a forced choice, isn't it? Once I start saying yes and yes and yes and yes and yes, without that being a two-sided conversation, it's almost like being in recruitment when you move people for higher pay. Well, I'm really happy in my job, but actually I just want more money. So can you find me another role? No. So I think to do that, ask them what they think you want from this and why you want it, and see how engaging they are. Now, that might not solve every problem you have, but it's a good way to begin. Does that help? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay, good.
Great question. Additional questions? Yeah, Ann.
You said that to keep people that you need to step up your retention services. Can you speak to that point and tell me a little bit about what you feel that would be?
Sorry, to...
Retention services, you said to keep people, in one of your slides you said to step up your retention of employees.
To step up retention, okay, so you've got, what I was saying was you got sort of, so you got turnover today, right? Everyone's in here today, they've got people. You've got the people that you're currently trying to keep. right? You don't want any more to leave unless we go back to functional turnover. There are people you want to leave, right? And then you've got how to then change the system of your organization to retain people better or more effectively once they start coming in. Was it to either one of those, or was it just sort of?
How do you keep them once they're in? Like
Yes.
how do you keep them once they're, what would be retention? What would be enhance that?
Onboarding is a huge part. And of course, if we had another hour or 2 hours, we could get into this. Onboarding is a huge part. It's not just sort of, great, you're hired, congratulations, there's your desk, see you next week, right? It's that socializing people into the company. You know, companies talk a lot about what the values are, and this is the way we do things around here, right? And sometimes we're really intentional about training employees on that or really communicating those well to employees. Other times we just presume that they know it, and once they're in, they're just going to do what we say, so we don't talk about it at all. But actually, to really onboard them effectively, to put them in touch with someone who can be a mentor, 2 or 3 colleagues that they can work closely with and hopefully get on with, are just a few key ways you can start. And then once they're onboarded, you start leading into areas of training, like where they might be a good match for your company, but there might be 1 or 2 aspects of what they do that are weak, and you can start helping them with that. Does that help? Okay, good.
Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
In light of COVID and everything, I'm just wondering, I mean, employers have to probably be more flexible, considering there is a demand for employees and the flexibility, I mean, with daycare, I think in our community, we know there's a job everywhere. You go into the service industries, you know, there's a longer wait because we don't have those employees. So how do we attract, with light of COVID, you can work at home, you can live anywhere, work anywhere. So some of those service industry jobs where we need people on the front lines, what is the win-win to the flexibility? What is your prescription? What would benefit the community as a whole?
In the service industry, I think, particularly if it's public-facing, number one for me would be to be seen as a company that has low turnover to begin with. Anyone here ever shop at Trader Joe's? Right. It's the same people there when they opened in GR 4 or 5 years ago, in an industry where people are probably leaving 30% plus a year. And every time I go there, I'm going, what are they doing differently? Right? How are they keeping people? So just as turnover begets turnover, retention begets retention, which is if we're seeing, wow, they don't lose people. Okay, I wonder what they're doing differently. I wonder what they've got going on that my last 3 or 4 jobs haven't got going on. That's number one. And in terms of flexibility, I mean, almost to the question earlier, it's somehow it's got to be a two-sided game. I mean, I'm just saying that point again. It's got to be, there has to be some buy-in from them to actually have a hook as to why they might leave if things are a certain way, right? If we're all looking for this one-sided magic bullet where people are saying, I'm not committed, I want more, right? And if you don't give it to me, I'm off, right? We can have an honest conversation about the best we can do. We can try and engage them to say, okay, that's great. I'm happy to be flexible in ways I can be that aren't going to bend other people's nose out of joint. What are you going to do for me? And if their honest answer is, well, you shouldn't have those expectations, then, you know, that's it. So there's got to be a measured amount of commitment from the people. Really, you know, it comes back to sales, right? Sales is not turning a no into a yes. It's turning a maybe into a yes now. Right? And it's the same with this. If your employees want out, then they're going to go. The question is, if they're on that border, if they're on that edge and they're thinking, leaving's a hassle, leaving's a risk, why would I be here? That's when you have the winning discussion. So I hope that gets to your point a bit. All right.
Anyone else? Marcus, I'll wrap up with one last question. You
course.
work a lot with young people at college and your students that are entering the workforce. What are you seeing about generational differences, and then what's the advice you're giving to your young students?
My advice I'm giving them is, I'm probably sounding a bit crusty when I say this, but you can't have everything your own way, right? It's all very well, you know, people talk about the generational difference of what people want now, and I get that things are shifting. But when I was finishing college 21 years ago, I wanted very different things than what I want now. So I say to them that it's very, very likely And I don't mean this in a patronizing way. I'm just saying that it's very, very likely that what you want now and what you'll want at 32 rather than 22 is going to change quite a lot. It's probably going to become more about, on average, a good measure of job security, really enjoying the work that you're doing, job autonomy, not being pushed around all the time from pillar to post. It's not just going to be about the salary. Where I am seeing a difference now is that young people, on average, tend to be a lot more clued into enjoying the job and finding meaning in it. And I think that can sometimes be interpreted as they just want to do what they want to do, right? That they just want everything their own way and they don't want to have any rules. But I actually find a lot of people, at least that I work with here at Hope College, have a lot of respect when you put certain boundaries in place. If they can see the rationale for why something is the way it is. They often don't want to be just completely free because they need to be led. They need to be given autonomy. So I think to actually sort of go into more perhaps as to what the meaning is behind the job and what that longer term growth development could be for them. I'm always saying to them, here's how you tell the difference when you're talking to companies about whether they're offering you a potential job or a career. Right? Here are some of the markers. Are they offering you a job or a career? Are they looking to invest in you? Are they looking to train in you? I love it when organizations, and thank goodness the college has several partners that do this around here, will actually take graduates and put them in a management training program where they go around and see multiple departments and how they work, and they get a real broad spread of ideas as to how different functions operationally in a company work. That's tremendous. And that's a lot of investment because it's not profitable at the beginning. It's the long-term thinking. So, yeah.
Great. And keep telling your students to stay in this community. We need them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, Dr. Marcus Fila, thank you for joining us today.
Thank
Great
you.
presentation. So as we wrap up today, I want to invite you and let you know what's going to be different next month. Our May event is going to be our Leadership Live event. So instead of being here a month from today, we're going to be at 11 a.m. over at Engedi Church for Leadership Live, which is a celebration of what we do so well in this community, which is leading people. And our guest speaker is nationally recognized. His name is Kevin Brown, and his topic is the hero effect, being what you're best when it matters the most. You will start seeing promos for this coming out early next week. So sign up. We'll see you next month in Getty Church, 11 a.m. Have a great day.